Welcome to the interview. I'm Marcus Carlson. Executives from some of the world's biggest companies are gathering in Paris this week. They're here to talk about climate change and to talk about how business and finance can take part in the efforts to cap the rise in global temperatures. Climate Week Paris is meant to galvanize the business community, and it comes in the lead up to a global summit in the French capital later this year. Leaders from 196 countries will come together in December to try to strike a global agreement to cap greenhouse gas emissions. For more on what business can do ahead of that summit, we can turn now to Peter Bakker. He's the president and CEO of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. It brings together some of the world's biggest companies, like Apple, for instance, the French utility EDF, IKEA, and Shell, just to mention a few. Welcome to the program, first of all.
Thank you.
Now, can you tell us a little bit more about your group and your organization? What's it for?
Yeah, the group was formed about 20 years ago. It brings together, like you said, 200 of the leading global companies from all corners of the world, these days from China, India, Japan, Europe, North America, really focusing on how can we push sustainable development into the economies. And of course, this week, it's all about climate change, because we're here to prepare ourselves for the COP21, the global climate agreement that will be negotiated at the end of the year here in Paris.
Speaking of that, how will you be part of the conversation now in the lead up to that global summit? And what are you here in Paris to do, so to speak? What's on your agenda here?
Yeah, I think the big breakthrough this year is that for the first time, the political process to come to a global climate agreement has opened up. In the past, it was just nation governments negotiating with each other around a deal. This year, for the first time since the last meeting in Peru, business and cities have been invited to be part of the negotiations. Our group, WBCSD, has been putting forward an idea to develop what is called the low carbon technology partnerships. So what can business do to actually bring solutions to climate change to the fore? What do we need to do together with governments to scale these solutions up? And really have a debate and a dialogue in Paris this week, but certainly also in December, to see where are the scaling levers for these solutions.
Do you think that companies will be able to speak with one voice in the lead up to Paris? Your membership, we talked about it.
Yeah.
You have construction companies, you have oil giants, you have transportation companies. You have a whole array of different companies. Can you speak with one voice?
Well, I think the one voice will come out in the sense that business has now recognized that creating solutions and scaling them up is actually an opportunity for business. That's where business leaders can now meet, where forward-thinking business leaders will actively take part in these discussions. There's no need to be one voice across different sectors. That's precisely what we have said to the French government, who will be the presidency of these climate negotiations in December. We must bring sector by sector together, and within the sectors, try to create those one voices. So let me give you a few examples. We have indeed oil and energy companies in our membership. They have little interest in forests or in agriculture. They should really focus on solutions like renewable energy or carbon capture and storage. The food companies, they should focus on climate smart agriculture solutions. Car companies on low carbon mobility, and so on. So that's the whole point. The one message across business leaders is business recognizes the opportunity that the transformation to a low carbon economy brings. The differentiation will come saying, I represent a certain sector. That sector can contribute this solution. Our role is to add all those solutions up, to bring those to the policymakers saying, hey, listen, here's 8 or 10 big ideas coming from different sectors. If you look at the impacts in emission reductions that can bring, that's more than your country contributions are currently forecasting. So why don't we work together to implement these solutions?
But before Climate Week Paris this year, there have been these reports of certain industries, certain lobbies trying to water down the result of Climate Week Paris and whatever will come out of your discussions. Is that correct? Are there certain industries trying to water down, trying to reduce ambitions?
I'm not so sure it's whole industries that are watering down the discussions. I would say this year is an interesting year. In the past, 5 years ago, a meeting like the one we're having later this year in Paris was held in Copenhagen, and that at the very last moment failed. There was no global agreement. At that point, the science around climate change was still fiercely debated. Is the climate changing, yes or no? And if so, is it then human action that is driving that, or is it something else? Those debates have all died down. So the lobbyists saying that climate is not changing are basically losing their voice. Climate is changing, science is clear, we need to fix solutions.
So you're saying that at least across the board, there's some sort of consciousness
98%.
that climate change is an issue.
Yeah, 98% of all the scientists in the world, or all the scientific publications in the world, are now confirming that the climate is changing, that it's human action that is driving that change, and that it's therefore human intervention that can avoid the bad consequences if we don't act. I'm not saying that every business leader in the world is a member of the WBCSD or will be part in Paris to say we must drive solutions to the fore. But the lobby saying climate is not changing has basically lost the match. Mm-hmm. A forward-thinking group, and I would argue a fast-growing movement of business leaders, is now saying solutions are not only good for climate, they're the only way to grow our economy going forward, and therefore, if I as a business want to be successful, that's the action that we should support.
What industries do you think are key in the negotiations looking ahead? Most of CO2 emissions come from the transport sector and also from electricity production.
Yeah, I would probably say the whole energy system. So both the exploratory companies, the oil and gas companies, the utility companies are crucial. Unless we transform to a low-carbon energy system, we won't make it. Big industrial sectors, steel, cement, chemicals, they have a big role to play in this transformation to low-carbon world. Agriculture and forest, strange enough, has a big role to play. Agriculture is something like 15% of the world's emissions, but at the same time could capture a lot of carbon in the soil if they look at it differently. So it's not one company that is good or bad, it's not one sector. What we must really try to do, and that's what we're here trying to do this week, is mobilize all sectors to become part of the solution.
But I bet you still a lot of business leaders, when they talk about climate adaptation, when they talk about climate mitigation, they're still worrying about the short-term costs.
Absolutely.
How do you encourage them to think in the longer term? What should politicians do in order to put together a framework where it is business sense, so to speak, to think about these issues?
No, there's in my mind, there are three things we need to do. The first one is we really need to drive innovation. So here today in Paris, more than 180 people are meeting to say what are innovative solutions that will really have an impact to reduce the emissions. Innovation is a key engine for developing business. The second thing is we need to have real conversations about what are the economic incentives in our system. Carbon pricing is one of the most important topics. In our view, it's an inevitable part of the solution. Mm-hmm. It's not a debate whether we should have a carbon price. It's a debate on how can we best implement it in a way that we create a globally viable solution. Once you put a carbon price in place, everybody, whether you're forward-thinking and you believe solutions are good, or whether you're on the fence waiting and see what happens, will get new incentives to act. The third element, and that's a key component and why it's so important that the French presidency is allowing business and cities to be part of these discussions later this year, we need to find new ways to collaborate. It's no longer true that governments on their own can solve these issues. Businesses on their own can't fix it, but business working closely with governments to put the right economic incentives to really stimulate the innovation that we need, and to work with city mayors who really are the ones who can implement solutions. That's where the power of collaboration will be.
Now, world leaders, they have agreed on one thing. They have agreed on a target, at least from an outside perspective. Yeah. That's one thing that we have agreed on. Yeah. And that target is to cap climate change at a global temperature rise of 2 degrees Celsius by 2100. Yeah. Do you think we're going to hit that target, or are we going to reach that target?
It is still feasible. So if you read the latest reports by the IEA, the International Energy Agency based here in Paris, it is still doable, but the window for the transformation of our economy is closing rapidly. If I say that in language that your viewers will understand, if we do not make a global deal this year in Paris, if business and cities do not commit to scaling up the solutions that we know that are out there, it will become very difficult to stay within the 2-degree warming. So yes, I think we will hit it, because the consequences of us not hitting it are far worse than us trying all our very best to make it happen. But it's the time for inaction is over, just as the cost of inaction is by now bigger than the cost of action. So it makes sense to scale up what we know we can do.
So it makes business sense, it makes political sense, so to speak.
It makes business, it makes political, and it makes economic sense. So one of the most powerful reports that I can refer you to is the new climate economy report that was issued last year by a big global commission. It actually compared, if you grow the economy as is, the way we grow our economies today, to a transformation towards a low-carbon economy, that's a much better route. It's not a more expensive route. The amount of money we need to invest in infrastructure is not higher in a green economy versus a traditional economy, but the cost of avoiding disasters, avoiding disruptions in our food chains, in other chains, are just not there. So we need to do this.
All right, Peter Bakker, the President and CEO of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. And with that, we're going to be wrapping up this edition of The Interview. Thank you for watching.